Hello, welcome to our webinar titled Social Marketing, Changing Behavior for Improved Water Quality. My name is Erin Ling and I am a Senior Extension Associate in the Biological Systems Engineering Department at Virginia Tech. I've been fortunate to work as a contractor for National Fish and Wildlife Foundation since 2009, assisting grantees with the use of community-based social marketing and associated strategies and tools. Thanks for joining us for this overview. Community-based social marketing, or CBSM for short, is written about extensively by several practitioners, including Philip Kotler, Nancy Lee, Doug Mackenzie Moore, and Nedra Weinreich. This webinar is a summary of many more in-depth resources, which are listed at the end of the presentation. CBSM is defined as the use of marketing principles and techniques to influence a target audience to voluntarily accept, reject, modify, or abandon a behavior for the benefit of the target audience or society as a whole. Here we are referring to behaviors and practices primarily that affect water quality. The essential components of the definition to remember are that we focus on a defined target audience, a desired behavior change for that audience, and in addition, we follow specific process to understand the target audience and the barriers to adoption of the desired behavior. Finally, the primary goal of CBSM campaigns is measurable and sustained behavior change. Ultimately, even with all the best education and outreach programs or promotion of practices through incentive programs, improving water quality from human-induced sources of pollution requires people to change their behavior. There are several common approaches taken to encourage behavior change. The attitude behavior approach assumes that there's a direct connection between people's attitudes and their behavior, and the economic self-interest approach attests that people always act in their own economic self-interest. Often these approaches are unsuccessful in eliciting behavior change. As we know, information campaigns are common. It's relatively easy to distribute printed materials or air radio or TV advertisements intended for a broad audience, everyone. Messages are often not well targeted but intended for the general public and often use language or concepts that are familiar and make sense to the creators, but not to the intended audience. There's always the human element as well. People don't always act rationally or based on the information given to them. All in all, research shows a poor association between people's attitudes and intentions and their behavior. We are concerned about measuring the impact of our efforts. The way we think about it, there are two ways to report impact and reach. First, reporting what we call contact metrics, which are essentially the number of people reached by a campaign. This number is important and by all means should be reported, but it is limiting in that it doesn't tell us what changed as a result of the campaign. We call these other metrics change metrics. They are the so what piece. How many people started composting or raking leaves from storm drains or installing rain barrels? What happened? Simply put, Mackenzie Moore provides 3 reasons an audience won't adopt a behavior. First, they might not know about it. It could be a knowledge barrier that's preventing adoption or behavior change. Second, they do know about it, but perceive significant challenges or barriers to adopting the behavior. We will discuss more about barriers in a few slides. Third and finally, the audience may know about the behavior and may not perceive significant barriers, but may perceive significant benefits to continue doing what they are doing now. That is the competing behavior to the desired behavior. Keep in mind that sometimes this competing behavior is doing nothing. There are 3 key ideas to remember in CBSM. People will gravitate towards the behavior with the most benefits and the fewest barriers. Barriers and benefits may be real or perceived and may vary significantly between individuals. Most importantly, desired behaviors compete with other behaviors. Adopting a new behavior requires altering or rejecting another behavior. The main idea is that understanding target audience and what motivates their behavior is key. In the next few slides, we will go through the process of developing a CBSM campaign. There are 4 overarching steps. Select BMP or behavior, know your audience, which involves understanding characteristics of your target audience and barriers and benefits specific to the behavior you wish to encourage, marketing your BMP or behavior, and measuring success through evaluation. In selecting the BMP or behavior, first ask yourself what environmental condition or problem must be remedied. Keep in mind that if possible, behaviors should have a high likelihood of adoption, be high impact, be something that many people aren't already doing. In addition, the best behaviors are what we call end state, meaning that they encompass all aspects of doing the behavior. An example of an end state behavior is installing and using a rain barrel, rather than just purchasing a rain barrel. Also ask whether the behavior is one-time or continuous. A one-time behavior would be something like installing a low-flow shower head, which wouldn't require additional actions for the benefit, reduced water use, to continue. Continuous behavior are things like picking up dog waste, recycling, or composting, where the action must happen over and over. Finally, consider possible competing behaviors at this point. What is your audience currently doing instead of what you want them to do? Next, focus on your audience. Who is your target audience? Try to be more specific than homeowners or residents if possible. This will make success more likely. If you are focusing on multiple audiences, segment and prioritize by which group will have the most impact by changing. Conduct a literature review to understand formative research. That is, see what other campaigns and efforts have already been done that may inform your campaign. Once you have a good understanding of other research, discern unique aspects of your own audience through qualitative, i.e. observations or focus group discussions, or quantitative approaches such as surveys or interviews. As you are studying your audience, ask yourself, what else do you know about them? What are their demographics? What media and messaging sources do they use? And what are their social norms regarding the behavior of interest? We cannot overstate how important targeting an audience is. As mentioned previously, large media campaigns may have high impact in the total number of contacts or people reached, but they are limited in the change that they can elicit. Behavior change comes more and more likely with more personalized messages and personal one-on-one contact. Think about striking a balance between the number of people you reach and how specifically relevant to that group you can make your messages and campaign. Remember that just because someone knows what you want them to do does not mean that they will do it. Dig deeper to understand barriers and then work strategically to overcome them. The next part of knowing your audience focuses on barriers and benefits. Don't assume you know what is driving your target audience to act. Find out from them. Ask. During this process, also consider what external factors may be influencing your audience. These can include regulations, policies, infrastructure, or social norms. For example, if you're promoting conservation landscaping in a neighborhood, a homeowners association policy may limit the types of plants or mulch that can be used on a lawn. Remember that changing behavior is complicated and often requires altering or giving up existing behaviors. Find out what aspects of current practices are benefiting your audience. One way to think of this is as a wine list. Once you state what you want your target audience to do, what will their response be? Well, I can't because. How would they fill in the blank? These are your barriers and benefits. This is one way to think about barriers and benefits in a systematic way. The benefits of the target behavior, installing and maintaining a backyard rain garden, may require some education or knowledge change for the audience to understand. The barriers to this practice also touch on a lack of knowledge, such as not fully understanding how they function. You will see that cost is also a potential barrier, both in terms of the cost to install and the time and money to maintain. These barriers may be addressed through a cost share or subsidy program or maintenance plan. The competing behavior, which is continuing to maintain the backyard as in the past, perhaps as a lawn, has its own barriers and benefits. One of these is a social norm, that the way it is now looks nice, how I like my yard to look, like the other yards in my neighborhood. The barriers to the existing behavior are also potentially knowledge barriers. Educating the audience that a rain garden can improve water quality of the nearby creek, address issues with standing water and mosquitoes, and prevent the basement from flooding. Oh, and look, perhaps the audience isn't that wild about lawn care after all. You will never know until you ask. Ultimately, you want to increase perceived benefits and decrease perceived barriers to the target behavior, and do the opposite to the competing behavior. Next comes designing the campaign to market the BMP or behavior. There's a lot more information about the tools we introduce here in the resources listed at the end. Be thoughtful in choosing your tools. Choose them specifically to address identified barriers. Prompts are basically reminders using audio or visual cues. These are primarily used to remind people to do a behavior they already want to do and are predisposed to do, but may forget. Prompts are best used close in time and space to where the activity will or will not happen. Here are several examples. Commitment can be a very powerful tool. It is getting a small initial request in order to request a more significant behavior change in the future. In other words, a foot in the door. Written commitments in public are more effective than verbal or private commitments. Research shows that commitments may help alter the way people see themselves, for example, as more environmentally responsible. Many watershed organizations use commitment by getting homeowners to agree to do a list of simple behaviors in exchange for receiving a lawn flag, labeling them as helping to protect a local stream or river. These flags then become a social norm in a neighborhood. After time, if you are the only one on the block without one, you may be more motivated to get involved. The opinions of others, especially peers, can have a strong impact on behavior, affecting it in two ways. Compliance is when behavior is changed for a reward. Conformity is when behavior is changed to be similar to others. Modeling is when one sees others doing the behavior, and social diffusion takes place when information is shared with others, further spreading the behavior or practice. Norms must be visual or easy to see and internalized, meaning people believe it's what they should do. Fencing cattle out of streams and allowing stream banks to recover and develop healthy riparian zones are examples of changing norms in many farming communities. Communication is one of the most commonly used and well understood CBSM tools. We want campaigns to capture attention with vivid, concrete messages that are specific and relevant to the target audience. Messages are most successful when they are easy to remember. Demonstration sites and workshops are powerful ways of communicating about desired behaviors or practices. Providing feedback about the impact that changes have is very beneficial as well. Here's another good example of communication, connecting someone's actions on their lawn to the impact that excess fertilizer may have on the nearby Rivanna River. Incentives are monetary or non-monetary rewards for performing a behavior. An example of a non-monetary reward is societal approval. Incentives must be significant enough to get the attention of the target audience and are best used to increase motivation or reward, but not to punish negative behavior. Consideration of possible external barriers is very important. These may be identified during the formative research phase. Examples include regulations, lack of infrastructure, or funding. Some external barriers are a matter of perception, not reality, and additional information may address the issue. It's important to remember that other behavior change tools may not be effective if these barriers exist. Once tools and messaging have been selected based on target audience and barriers research, pilot testing is essential for campaign success. Make sure you consider all the details of the campaign and try to test these with an actual subset of your audience if possible, and adjust based on the feedback received. Other helpful questions to ask yourself: where and when will the behavior and campaign happen? What will the target audience members receive for changing their behavior? Products can be giveaways like a sticker or magnet, recognition, cost share funding, or another real or symbolic item. Finally, ask what is someone giving up to participate or adopt the new behavior? Can this cost or trade-off be minimized? Evaluation is a huge part of successful CBSM campaigns. Think evaluation and setting up to measure change from the outset. How will you follow up with the target audience to measure impact and change? Keep in mind that observation is best, followed by self-reporting. If possible, think about tracking and communicating in terms of outputs, tangible products created, such as brochures or flags distributed. Outcomes, which are changes in knowledge, attitudes, or behavior. For example, the number of people who installed rain barrels or disconnected downspouts. And impacts, water quality benefits. For example, pounds of nitrogen or phosphorus reduced, or the number of nutrient management plans written covering how many acres. If possible, also think in terms of return on investment. What was the bang for your buck? After our discussion of the importance of target audience and barrier research, it is clear that each of us sharing our stories is important and has the potential to make future campaigns considerably simpler and cheaper. We encourage you to be specific when defining target audiences and BMPs or behaviors. If we all commit to using common language for practices and behaviors across the watershed and value the steps of the CBSM process, sharing our stories will be more powerful. Think about discussing your program in terms of an elevator speech. How can you sum up your approach, successes, and lessons learned in just a few minutes? We are currently in the process of developing and populating a live case study database called the Crowdsourced Behavior and Target Audience Database. Once live, this database will provide an opportunity to document formative research findings sortable by target audience and behavior or BMP, successes and lessons learned. There will also be an interface to upload and share survey, interview, and focus group tools, as well as marketing and messaging examples. We also hope to develop a mentoring network where novice practitioners can connect with CBSM technical assistance providers to ask questions and seek advice. Nancy Lee talks about several groups of people that we should consider when promoting new behaviors, or BMPs. First, the show-me's are ready and willing to do what we want them to do, but just need a little help, or perhaps more information, or a small incentive. The next group, which often makes up the majority of the target audience, is the help-me's. This group needs a little more prodding and often a little more barriers research to find out what's preventing them from adopting the behavior. They are willing, they just need a little more help. Finally, the make-me's are people who just have their heels dug in and are not willing to change unless they're made to do so. As social marketers, our efforts are best spent on the show-me's and perhaps most importantly, the help-me's. In summary, as Doug Mackenzie Moore points out, initiatives to promote behavior change are most effective when carried out at the community level and involve direct contact with the target audience. For many watershed organizations, this strategy is possible, working with homeowners at a workshop or neighbors helping neighbors understand and implement new behaviors. We need to utilize lessons learned from similar initiatives, but make sure that we take the time to understand the local nuances and context that might color our specific target audience. Always think in terms of your target audience. Where are they starting? What do they know or understand? What drives their behavior? And what barriers prevent them from adopting or acting the way that you wish they would? So start where you are. Get to know your audience. Ask them questions in the most rigorous way you can, given your capacity and resources. This may look different for different efforts. Intercept interviews, observation studies, or a few questions added to an online survey or intake form are a great way to start to better understand your audience. Ask and listen. This slide contains a few great additional resources on CBSM. I highly recommend you check them out. Thanks for joining me for this webinar. Please contact National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Chesapeake Bay Stewardship Fund for more information.